The Atacama humanoid, nicknamed Ata for short, otherwise known as the 6-inch alien, has recently become a worldwide sensation. Though the discovery of the diminutive mummified humanoid occurred in the year 2003, it was popularized by Steve Quayle and Klaus Dona in 2009, and then became the subject of a documentary film entitled Sirius in 2012. The Sirius documentary features the life and work of ufologist Dr. Stephen Greer. In the film, Dr. Greer conducts a rigorous scientific analysis of the Atacama humanoid, involving an autopsy, X-rays, CAT scans, and genetic sequencing. The results of the analysis have caused a stir of controversy in the scientific community. Although no one is claiming that Ata is a hoax, since he is comprised of real genetic material, organs, and bone marrow, many scientific personalities are claiming that he is nothing more than a mummified, aborted fetus, while other more intrepid minds are wondering if the entity is an extraterrestrial from outer space. We'll examine both claims, but first, let's review the background information. The Atacama humanoid was discovered in 2003 in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile by Oscar Munoz near an abandoned church in a ghost town called La Noria, 56 kilometers to the interior of Iquique. While searching for historical artifacts, Munoz found the entity lying on the ground wrapped in a white cloth tied with a violet ribbon, in which was found, details the Chilean newspaper La Estrella de Arica on the 19th of October 2003, a strange skeleton not more than 15 centimeters long. It was a creature with sharp teeth and a bulging skull with a strange protuberance on top. In addition, its crusted body was dark in color and, unlike humans, had 9 ribs. It is important to note 3 interesting facts about the Atacama Desert. First, it is the driest place on Earth, receiving less than 1 millimeter of rainfall per year, making it a virtual wasteland with almost no life. Second, it is one of the premier locations for space observation on Earth, hosting some of the world's most sophisticated observatories, including the Paranal, which has been called the world's most advanced visible light astronomical observatory. The desert is also a NASA staging ground for expeditions to Mars, due to its Mars-like environment and soil composition. And third, it is widely considered to be one of the most paranormally active places on Earth, with frequent sightings of spectral beings, UFOs, and yes, small humanoid entities, or duendes as they are called in the Andean regions of South America. The scientific analysis of the Atacama humanoid was conducted by a team of specialists led by Dr. Gary Nolan, a professor of microbiology and immunology at Stanford University. Dr. Ralph Lachman, also Stanford University, and author of the book Radiology of Syndromes, Metabolic Disorders, and Skeletal Dysplasias, was a consultant on the project who directed and reviewed the X-rays and CAT scans. Upon analysis of the scans, Dr. Lachman concluded that the humanoid's appearance is not the result of any known deformity, genetic defect, skeletal dysplasia, or any other known human abnormality. Based on an examination of the epiphyseal plates in the knees, bone structure development, and a tooth embedded in the mandible, Dr. Lachman also concluded that the specimen had lived to be 6 to 8 years of age. Dr. Nolan agreed. The entity had definitely lived long enough to eat, metabolize, and breathe air. The specimen was determined to have been mummified by the intense arid climate of the Atacama Desert and was at least a few decades old, or possibly older. The results of the genetic analysis conducted by Dr. Nolan were enigmatic. Nolan's team discovered that 91% of Ata's genes matched up with human genes. The 9% in DNA mismatches could stem from several factors, including the specimen's degradation, insufficient data, or unidentifiable sequences. In other words, the entity's genome has been confirmed to be mostly human, and therein lies the enigma. How could the Atacama humanoid be mostly human and yet only 6 inches tall? To put it scientifically, why does the phenotype not appear to fit the genotype? The answer, in my humble opinion, is quite simple. We are just beginning to understand how genes work. The genome of a living organism is not a simple mechanism that can be accurately manipulated simply by rearranging its individual parts. Instead, It is a highly complex system of integrated coordinating components which operate both independently and cooperatively. Because of this, slight alterations to certain genes in specific locations of the genome can lead to remarkable variations in both the appearance and nature of an organism. Keep in mind that, genetically speaking, all human beings are 99.9% the same. A mere 0.1% difference in genetic composition accounts for all of the variation between us. The fact that 85% of a mouse's DNA is the same as ours provides us with a clear illustration of how a little genetic variation can make a very big difference. There is an aggressive attempt to debunk the findings of the serious documentary analysis. Even though the professionals working with the Atacama humanoid have ruled out the possibility that it is an aborted fetus, many people are still holding on to that claim. The argument is not without merit. There do appear to be some distinct similarities between the mummified humanoid and the skeletal structure of a fetus. Many who argue the fetus theory claim that the humanoid's head was deformed during the extraction process of the abortion, in which a hook was inserted into the back of the skull to pull the fetus out of the womb. The missing rib is easily explained away by this crowd simply with the notion that it had not yet developed while in the womb, and the narrowing of the rib cage, along with the erect posture of the specimen, could have easily resulted when the fragile fetus was wrapped in the cloth. Finally, their prime argument seems to be that the bone density analysis of Dr. Lachman was fatally flawed because the specimen was mummified, which could change the composition and density of the bone, making it near impossible to determine the age of the humanoid with any certainty. While I believe that these claims are logical, I do not believe that they are substantial enough to undermine the expertise of Dr. Ralph Lachman. There are several crucial factors that debunk the fetus theory of the debunkers. First of all, the bone structure of certain parts of the humanoid's anatomy is radically different in comparison to the corresponding parts of a normal fetus. According to the results of the analysis, we know that this is not due to any deformity, genetic defect, skeletal dysplasia, or any other known human abnormality. The skull of the specimen displays intricate structural anomalies that would not have been caused by hook extraction during an abortion. Furthermore, the common practice of abortion in the small towns of the Andean communities, where Ata was found, is not the dangerous procedure of extraction from the womb with a hook, but induced miscarriages through the use of medicinal plants. Finally, Dr. Lachman's conclusion about the age of the humanoid was not based solely on bone density, but on bone structure development, including of the teeth that the entity obviously had, one of which was still attached to its mandible during the examinations. It would have been much easier and safer for Dr. Lachman to declare the diminutive mummified humanoid an aborted fetus, especially in light of the speculation that it might be extraterrestrial. And yet, after intense scrutiny, the guy that wrote the book on skeletal abnormalities in infants ruled the fetus possibility out. There is, of course, no indication whatsoever that the Atacama humanoid is of extraterrestrial origin. Those who were hoping that the serious documentary's analysis of the entity would yield the kind of results needed to finally break the seal on extraterrestrial disclosure were sorely disappointed. In conclusion, I believe that what we have here is exactly what we should have expected from the beginning. A humanoid hybrid whose origin is terrestrial, but whose genetic composition is not fully human, and a scientific community struggling to deal with that fact. In my mind, the question of whether or not the humanoid is a fetus is not really the most important one. In the serious documentary, Dr. Nolan declares, "The sequence that we got from the mitochondria tells us with extremely high confidence that the mother was an indigenous Indian from the Chilean area. Mitochondrial DNA testing only reveals the genetic lineage of the mother. My question is, who was the father? I'll bet he wasn't very handsome. I'll bet he wasn't fully human. And I'll bet we will never be told the truth if I'm right." I'm Timothy Alberino, reporting for SteveQuail.com.
At this point in time, it should be very apparent that our governments around the world have absolutely no intention to disclose the truth about UFOs and extraterrestrial beings. But it is happening, and it has been happening for quite some time. Think about all the high-ranking ex-military officers and pilots that have come forward to testify that yes, they have seen these craft, and they have seen these beings. The doctors, the researchers, are they crazy? Or is it just that reality is crazy? Right now, there is an endless amount of video footage capturing UFOs and aliens. Are they all fake? These days, how do you tell the difference between what's real and what's fiction? Now, the reason I say reality is subjective and not objective is because it is personal. When people open up the newspaper or turn on the television and see reports of people being blown to bits, do they stop and take the day off work? No, they go about their day. Why? Because that's not their reality. That's someone else's. Now, a person sighting a UFO and you never sighting one will absolutely cause you to look at something like that objectively because you need evidence. And until you are convinced with proof, that is not your reality. When and if the day comes where you find this proof, then your reality becomes personal. Because not everyone is going to believe you. So I want to demonstrate this by presenting something that has been researched and discussed for several years. And many doctors understand that it is not a hoax. And that is the discovery of this tiny little being, the Atacama humanoid. I'm going to tell you the story and show you some of the findings, and at the end, you can objectively tell me what's real. The Atacama Desert, located on the Pacific coast west of the Andes Mountains in Chile. This 1,000-kilometer or 600-mile strip of desert is one of the driest places on Earth, with an average rainfall of only 15 millimeters or 0.6 inches per year, which is really just a nice way of saying that it doesn't rain. The Atacama is considered the oldest desert in the world. And interestingly enough, due to its aridity, in an elevated region of the desert, its soil and landscape have often been compared to that of Mars. In fact, this is the site of NASA testing for future missions to Mars. Not only that, if you didn't know this, the Atacama Desert, Chile, is one of the best places in the world to view the stars, and it is home to the Apex Observatory, the Paranal Observatory, the Cerro Amazonas Observatory, Las Campañas Observatory, La Silla Observatory, Tololo, Gemini, Alma, and the list goes on and on. You may also be interested to know that this place is known for its high level of paranormal activity. So knowing that this place is a hotspot for ghosts, UFOs, and strange creatures, would it surprise you that someone would eventually find the remains of something that is seemingly non-human? According to the publishings of the Chilean newspaper La Estrella de Arca, an antiques collector by the name of Oscar Munoz had visited the ghost town of La Noria to further expand his collection of artifacts. As he dug in an area around an abandoned church, he discovered a white cloth tied with a violet ribbon. and inside, a very small, very strange humanoid skeleton. Now, the story is Munoz sold this thing to a pub owner in Iquique for 30,000 pesos. It was then sold to a Spanish businessman and taken to Spain. The
Oh, I hate having to appear like that. It really is the most tiresomely noisy manifestation. Still, rather expected of one, I suppose.
Get down, get down. O great one, O supreme being, O creator of all the universe, without whom will be naught but scarab beetles on the...
Dreadful mess. Is the pig with you? Right. Well, we'll sort him out first.
Og, here, quick. Out the way.
What was he doing, eh? One thing I can't stand, it's mess.
It wasn't until 2009 that this specimen caught the interest of medical doctor and ufologist Stephen Greer, who, with the assistance of Stanford University's doctors Gary Nolan and Ralph Lockman, would, through the analysis of X-rays, scans, and DNA extracted from the bone marrow of one of the specimen's ribs, unlock the mystery of this incredible being. The Atacama humanoid is a 13 centimeter or 6-inch tall child, not an aborted fetus that has been ruled out, but a 6 to 8 year old child. But how? How could a human this size survive for that period of time? If this was some type of mutation or human abnormality, then it is very unlikely that the child would have lived to be 8 years old. In fact, the investigating scientists agree that this is not the result of any mutation, abnormality, or disease known to man. The analysis of the mitochondria tells us that this creature was a male, born from a woman of the indigenous Chilean Indians. However, the DNA analysis tells us that this thing is only 91% human, leaving 9% of its genetic makeup open for questioning. It has 10 ribs. We have 12, and on a rare occasion, 11. The head is abnormally large with an elongated skull and alien-like eye sockets. Now, how many of you agree that this is human? If this creature was the son of a Chilean native woman, who was the father? What was the genetic makeup of the father to create such a being? Was there a father at all? Could this have been an experiment? Who fed this thing? Who kept it alive? Its mother? Did it somehow survive on its own? Something else that is disturbing is that looking at the injuries to the skull and fractures found in the bones, they believe this creature may have died a violent death. Now, there is no doubt about it, folks. This is a real creature. The problem is explaining it. This is not the only specimen that has been found, by the way, and take note that there have been reports of the discovery of ancient tiny humanoid fossils found in Antarctica. They estimate these to be millions of years old, keeping in mind that Antarctica was once geographically connected to South America. Maybe the answer can be found on Mars. Did you know that there are people who claim that there are humans that are already on Mars? And there are a few who claim that not only are there people on Mars, but there are tiny people on Mars. I swear, folks, you can't make this stuff up. And due to the amount of images coming back from Mars over the past few years, there are a number of people who are finding strange anomalies within the photos that are taken off of the Mars rover and Google Mars. It's crazy, I know, but it only gets crazier once you start to look into it. And believe me, it is quite entertaining. But very creepy in a way, because you wonder, why would a person even suggest the very idea of something so absurd? It makes you wonder, right? Maybe this finding is too small or too old to be considered a big deal. I'd like to think that the more we find out about this creature and others like it, the more we can fit the pieces of the puzzle together about our own existence and the existence of humankind throughout the universe.
For women, almost every one of the abductees that are female undergo gynecological procedures of various sorts, sometimes painful, sometimes not. But the result and the after effects are that many, many, many abductees, much higher than the national average, suffer from extremely severe gynecological problems after being used by the aliens in these procedures. In fact, we have a report very recently of a 10-year-old girl who just had to have a hysterectomy because of what they had done with her. It's getting younger and younger. There are also many implantations performed on abductees. You've heard about the little BB probes that are put up the nose and go penetrate into here, like my husband had when he and his best friend were abducted when they were 12. As often, or maybe even more often, they use behind the eye. As you heard with Barbara's presentation today, they take the eye out, they do the implant behind it, put the eye back in. They also put them in through the ear. Most recently, they've begun putting them behind the ear into the base of the brain. And very often they go into the spine at some point, ranging from the base of the neck all the way down to the bottom of the spine. All right, what does this have to do with crossbreeding or spiritual elevation, you might wonder, as I do. Many abductees report the brain surgery, like Beth, when they opened her head and took out her brain. This report is as common as the sperm and ova taking, although you don't hear about it as often. And people who have this happen use almost the same phrase. They opened my head and took out my brain. Word for word. I can repeat it on tape after tape, the same scenario. Certain kinds of instruments are repeatedly reported as part of these procedures. You know about the little light bar or light wand that's used to scan over the body. This is very, very common. You know about the little small box, usually a little black box, that's reported in many of these scenarios. We don't know up until this point, perhaps we know now, but we did not know what this little black box was all about. In Masquerade of Angels, I think you'll find some information that may shed light on what that little black box is all about. And I don't think you're going to be real happy with it, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway if you read the book. A long needle device, sometimes into the brain, sometimes into the abdomen, sometimes into other areas, even into between the toes, is reported repeatedly. And then, of course, there's the infamous alien dentist chair. How many of you have been in that? You're in the chair, the equipment pulls down from overhead, and you get the little laser type or razor type or probe type device that is used in any number of areas on the body. These are very similar from report to report to report. Abductees are very frequently given an unknown liquid to drink. No explanation for what this is about. Sometimes they're given a substance to swallow or to eat with no explanation of what it is. And the results of these liquids and these pills or substances are varying. Sometimes it's dizziness, loss of consciousness, extreme nausea, and sexual stimulation. All of these are frequently reported from these substances we are made to ingest. What are the aliens communicating in these scenarios? Well, very often they don't communicate a darn thing. You're out, you don't get to ask questions, they don't answer any questions, they do the procedure, and you're back home, and that's it.